He was born half a man, half a fish. His name was CodEye. Shunned by a cruel society, he retreated to his shack. His one passion was to tell stories. But he had no stories. He met a travelling man who would regale him with tales. One day, CodEye did him over and decided to ignore the copyright infringements. These are those stories.
Have you ever been lost? Have you ever lost something or someone? Some might say, I've lost my mind. If you listen to this episode, you may even lose your own mind. For the episode centres around a man called Chris Wood, who ironically is lost in the woods, and in the process loses his mind. I once got lost in the shopping mall in Vermont, but that's another story for another day. Today is the story of Chris. Chris had been lost now for almost a week. He'd forgotten how he'd even got into this situation. He stopped for a breather as he tried to work out where he was. Where am I? Chris put his hand into his pocket and pulled out a cigarette packet. The cigarettes were the only things that were keeping him sane this whole time. He took out the last cigarette and lit it. He began to take a long drag that felt like a lifetime. After his second drag, he looked at the packet that had given him so much support through the last week. It's been nice knowing you. Likewise, mate. Chris looked puzzled. Well, it's not every day a cigarette just randomly starts talking to you. Did you just talk? Well, I don't see anyone else here. Do you? No. So, then it must be me, right? But cigarette packets don't talk. But we've already established that it was me that was talking, so we therefore must assume, in this case, that cigarette packets can indeed talk. I suppose so. Also, I resent being referred to as a cigarette packet. What do you want to be referred to as, then? Christopherson. Christopherson? That's my name. I must be going mad. The evidence is certainly stacking up. Convinced he was losing his mind, Chris threw the cigarette packet on the floor and took a few steps back. There the packet lay, motionless. Chris stared at it intently. Finally, he was convinced that the packet could not talk, and turned away to walk back into the woods. Oi, are you just going to leave me here? Chris stopped in his tracks, gave a disheartened sigh, and turned back to face the cigarette packet. I mean, it's littering for a start. He slowly made his way over to where Christopherson lay and picked him up. That's better. So, are you really real? What sort of grammar is that? Maybe the shock of a talking cigarette packet was too much for Chris, because he failed to notice that it was him operating the packet's lid in order to make it talk. You mean, am I an actual physical occurrence or merely a figment of your imagination? Chris nodded quietly. Well, I'm an actual physical occurrence as far as that on my cigarette packet that you purchased from the shop at the end of your road and smoked. As to whether my vocal capacities are also actual or merely a trick of the mind is still open to debate. Christopherson's beautiful use of the English language had Chris stumped. Still, can't hurt to have some company. So you want to come with me? Well, not really. You seem a bit slow, but I've had no better offers as of yet. Okay. Chris put the cigarette packet in his trouser pocket and carried on walking into the woods. Have you got somewhere more hygienic to put me? More hygienic? Have I got to spell it out for you? No, understand that. I just don't understand how it would affect you.
Well, it doesn't. It's more the principle of the matter.
Chris pulled the packet back out of his trousers and placed it in his shirt pocket.
That's better.
Are you going to do anything else other than moan?
Well, firstly, the question could possibly be, are you not going to give me something to moan about? Secondly, although my capabilities are limited, me being an empty cigarette packet obviously, I can read a map and do a mean impression of Alan Sugar.
Really?
Oh yeah, you're fired.
No, I meant the map reading.
Yeah, I can do that.
Can you get me out of here then?
Sure, have you got a map?
No.
Well, how am I supposed to read the map then?
But you mentioned you could read a map.
Yeah, I can. But I do have to have the map in front of me first. That's kind of how map reading works.
Well, I don't have a map.
I asked you for a map. You couldn't even do that right. You're fired.
During the next 4 weeks, Chris and Christopherson the cigarette packet bonded in the strange way that mortal enemies do. Soon they found themselves in a large clearing in the woods where a magnificent oak tree loomed above them. Well, I think it was an oak. It might have been an elm. I mean, I've never been good at identifying tree types. I've never really thought it would come in use. Well, don't I have egg on my face now then? But anyway, Chris and Christopherson found themselves at the foot of this tree. By now, Chris was low on energy and could hardly go on any longer. He collapsed down, kneeling in front of the tree.
I can't go on. Why not?
Safe to say that being made of cardboard and having no need for nourishment, Christopherson was still full of life, much to Chris's irritation. I've got no food, no water, no shelter, and no fags.
I keep telling you, I resent being referred to as a fag packet.
I just wish I had a beer.
I wish I had better company.
Just then, as Chris looked up, he spotted a bottle of beer hanging from one of the branches on the tree. He stumbled to his feet and pulled it down. Without a second's hesitation, Chris downed the whole bottle of beer. Naturally, this was a very special tree.
Well done, Paul Daniels. Now wish for something else.
Okay, I wish for some food. Chris excitedly looked around the tree, where he spotted a carrier bag full of food. He ran to the bag and opened it to reveal nothing but a bunch of carrots. However, a month of being lost in the woods meant that Chris really didn't mind eating raw carrots. He feasted on them as if he was at a banquet.
Use your imagination next time.
You're right. I wish there was a way out of here. A bold wish. And some might argue the wish he should have made in the first place. Chris excitedly looked around the nearby woods, but couldn't see anything. Dejected, he returned back to the foot of the tree, where he spotted a large wooden rifle. Propped up, nearby, he hesitantly made his way over, where he picked up the firearm. Chris began to inspect it. This was the first time Chris had seen a rifle of this kind since the robbery last May.
Well, that wasn't what you wished for. You've peaked too soon.
I don't get it.
Well, you wouldn't. It's easy. That rifle is your way out of here.
Chris slowly turned the gun around and pointed it into his mouth. He moved his finger over the trigger, which is a very stupid thing to do. And I must stress, you shouldn't try it at home. Then suddenly, in the distance, Chris spotted something moving through the woods. He dropped the rifle and looked over to see a giant chicken walking towards him holding a hunting magazine. The chicken spotted Chris and shouted over,
"What the hell are you doing?"
Panicking at the sight of a giant chicken, Chris picked up the rifle and pointed it in the chicken's direction.
You're just in my head. Go away.
What?
Go on. Plug him. Be quiet. Be quiet.
Whoa, calm down there.
Determined that the chicken was just a bad hallucination that developed from eating raw carrots, Chris closed his eyes and fired the rifle.
Right, he'll fry up nice.
Chris opened his eyes to see the chicken fall to the floor, clutching its wing.
Jesus Christ!
Racked with guilt, Chris ran over to help the chicken. When he got closer, he realized it was just a man in a chicken costume.
Who are you?
My name is Carl.
What were you doing here, Carl?
I was hunting.
But why are you dressed as a chicken?
Think about it. You're a deer walking through the woods. You see a man with a gun and alarm bells start ringing. You see a chicken. All's good. Nothing to worry about.
With the small talk out of the way, Carl decided to get down to the point.
You shot me.
I don't know. There was this fag packet. He told me to. I thought you weren't real.
You ought to be locked up.
Stop calling me a fag packet. With that last insult, Carl closed his eyes and died in Chris's arms. Chris picked himself back up, armed himself with a rifle, and walked off into the woods. You know, now that I think about it, maybe the chicken guy was your way out of the woods, and you probably shouldn't have shot him. And the moral of the story is, if you're ever lost, then you should have a map, in case you meet someone that can read it. Your own best friend. Raw carrots make you shoot chickens. It's really open to you to make your own moral out of this. Stop looking to me for all your answers.